when you're pouring yourself out to help others, I mean, I think that's what it's all about, is because if you help enough people, you're going to realize that your situation that you're complaining about, that you have all the mirrors all on yourself and your problems start to become paling in comparison.
The Apartment Gurus podcast is brought to you by Greenlight Equity Group, an apartment acquisitions and holdings firm co-founded by Carl York and Tate Siemer, host of this show. We offer you the opportunity to be an owner of cash-flowing, wealth-growing apartments without the headaches of being a landlord. These assets are recession-resistant, risk-mitigated, offer significant tax advantages, and are a great alternative to the stock market. Ready to check it out? Go to www.investwithgreenlight.com today to book a personal consultation with Carl or Tate. Again, that's investwithgreenlight.com. We look forward to meeting you. Welcome to The Apartment Gurus, where twice a week, host Tate Siemer brings you deep dive interviews with the wisest gurus in the apartment investing industry. These experts are sure to create game-changing value and inspiration designed to catapult your business to the next level. Be sure to reach out to Tate at www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. And now, here is Tate Siemer and the Apartment Gurus.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode in the Apartment Gurus podcast series, coming to you from the new digs in Sayulita, Mexico, Pacific coast of Mexico, little hippie surf town that I ended up in somehow for the better part of next year. The previous episode that released, the solo episode, kind of gets into Housewise and all the implications of that, and really excited to be here. Really excited to be doing this show with Andrew McNair, who has quite a story and has done some things in business that, quite frankly, I've never even heard of people doing, and has a book that I kind of want to. Andrew, I think we'll start right with the book, man. I can't wait to hear and talk about that. But doing big things in the syndication space inside of multifamily and other asset classes as well. And has done everything he's done at remarkably young ages, along the way. So Andrew, I'm going to kind of let you illuminate us on some of the details as to what I just alluded to. But first of all, just super glad to have you, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad to share my story. I started, like many people who'll be able to relate on the show, is I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I really related because my dad was a government worker. My dad was that poor dad. He was rich in integrity, but not rich in material wealth. And so when I read that book, I took it to heart. And so I started interning at a financial firm on every day after school. And this Mr. Miyagi figure took me under his wing. He said, I'll teach you about finance. If you show up every day, you work for free and you grind at this office, I'll teach you about money. Wow. And so I actually took all my waiting table money on the weekends at 14 to 16. I'd saved up $62,000. Wow. And then 2008 happened. And I was watching real life families, 401ks, their entire retirement get cut in half. Yeah. And so I put it into the stock market and it turned into $142,000. So wow. You can imagine, Tate, I thought I had the Midas touch. I thought that everything I touched turned to gold. And sadly, like this creeping voice started to come over my shoulder that just egged me on to take more risks, to make more money, to push harder. And so I started seeing my own financial advisory practice at 18, giving financial advice. And I really connected my self-worth with my net worth. And then the University of Hard Knocks called in the tuition payment. I doubled down, kept on doubling down on this stock that was losing money, thinking it would bounce back. And I actually lost all of that $147,000 right before I was about to buy my first duplex at 18. And so you would find me at the age of 19 screaming into my pillow and punching my mattress because I was bankrupt. My self-worth, my net worth had just gone down the drain. And that day was a priceless education for me because one, I wanted to be diversified. I never wanted to have all my assets in the stock market. I never wanted to have all my assets in one stock, how crazy and ludicrous that was. And that was the seed of, or the egg of Swan Capital, Sleep Well at Night Capital. But then also something else happened that I was like, you know what, God, if I give everything away I have, I can't lose what I've given away. And so that's how Rich, Young, Powerful podcast, the Giving Crisis book began. And then what's crazy is I got another chance. And I was able to have FIRE by, age 25, never having to work again after 25 because I had 25 houses. Wow. I accumulated 136 apartments, 54 houses, but that greedy, like over the shoulder voice came back saying, push harder. You need to make 7 figures. What about 8 figures a year? And I just felt that greedy voice appear. And I said, no, I'm going to start giving it away. And that's what led me to write The Giving Crisis.
Man, I mean, right there, just a lot to unpack and even ask about. But I just starting back at the beginning, just that the Rich Dad Poor Dad thing is almost become like a little bit of a, not a cliche, but like it comes up. I mean, let's say 5, 6 out of 10 interviews I do, like it is at the beginning of so many of our journeys and paths, to the point that it's remarkable to me. And I mean, what an impactful book. And, my guess is probably almost every listener here has read it many times, or it certainly knows of it as a foundation. So, yeah,
I did meet him though later in life, though. I do want to tell you that I will throw him under the bus, and I don't mind. Like we almost got into a fist fight over online because
Robert?
It's so true. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to meet your heroes because he was like, I was talking about diversification, how you need to have money in real estate, you need to have money in stocks, and he's like, stop the show. I don't believe in any of that. Wow. He's like, I believe everyone should be self-employed. You should never be an employee. You should never put money in the stock market. And I was like, well, bro, we got completely different concepts of reality. I said, if you take your logic, sir, then everyone would be self-employed. No one would have an employee. I said, if you take your logic to the nth degree, then everyone is self-employed. There is no capitalistic market. And I said, that's the whole point. There is a stock market, is to give businesses capital. And I said, I'm happy to close this show down. So I tell people, be careful, who you follow for too long, because if you stay in it too long, you sometimes become the villain. And you can see now he's promoting gold and some crazy other investments.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. I'm going to leave it there. I think it's a really good point. And there's some examples in my world just very recently, people that I just kind of had on a pedestal and
right.
We're all human beings. Right. And we change and evolve, and we're all one step away from stupid, as I was told once. Yeah. And I would say too, like on the converse, I'd say we're all one step away from greatness, and like being the Roberts of the world, and the authors of the world, and the book writers and creators of the world, and the leaders of the world. And I think sometimes we're a lot closer to that than we realize, but that in it of itself comes with the need for humility and discernment and wisdom and self-knowledge and all that. So
spot on.
So how old were you when that book hit your radar? I guess let's start from there.
I was 14. So, for all the parents out there, my parents had refinanced their house, I think 3 times while I've been alive. And so I wanted to say to all the parents, like, be the parent that doesn't just try to hide it, make money a taboo subject. I mean, it shouldn't be the only conversation you're having at the dinner table, but you should be having conversations at the dinner table saying, hey, don't do what I did. You need to go look in better places for education. And that's what they did, and handed me that book. Yeah, cool. So before we started recording, I guess talk about what you did even before, like, say, the age of 18. I think it's amazing. Yeah. So, when I started interning at that financial firm, it was a real eye opener that, I wanted to start a wealth management firm where I could have estate planning, tax planning under one roof. Because a lot of people, if they've ever invested in the stock market, they've ever worked with a financial advisor, because I'm an RIA. Before I started Cygnet, our fund, as an RIA, a lot of people have experience with a financial advisor where they only want to talk about the money, the investments. And so I was like, don't want that to be my firm. I want to have the estate planning, the tax planning, and the real estate at part of the conversation. And so, anyone that owns their own business, that's the beauty. You can build whatever you want in America. It's the land of opportunity. So that's when I started my own firm. That's why I built it the way I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you started accumulating real estate real young, got a portfolio of houses by what?
Yeah. So all multifamily.
Okay.
So duplexes, quadplexes, triplexes. And so my goal was to go to 200 homes. And the problem is the more houses I accumulated, the less hair I had. And I don't know if they're correlated, but so I started saying, well, I think if I get to 200 houses, it might kill me. So I started selling all of my houses. And that's when I started the Cygnet Fund.
Okay. And so you sold your portfolio. It wasn't based on the market, the economy. It was more based on your own values and kind of where you saw things with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did time it pretty well because I was either at a precipice where, interest rates were really low. So it's either I pull out all the capital and then double down, go to 200 homes, bring in property management under one roof, or do I go more the passive real estate? And that's what I talk to my clients about. Like, if you go down that road, you're going to get tired. And so I wanted to make sure that our clients were invested not only in active real estate, but passive real estate with the fund model or investing into syndications.
Yeah. Obviously, I started the show saying we're going to jump right in your book, and I promise we will, listeners. And it's right there for me. But I some of this has gone a little different way, and have a lot of different questions to ask Andrew here. But we're going to get right there. I guess let's talk real quick about getting into. This is a show about multifamily syndication and syndication more broadly as well. Where did you catch the vision, I guess, for being a fund manager and starting a fund and going that route in syndication?
Well, it's just funny. I mean, I meet a lot of my colleagues, people that are not only I respect, but they're friends of mine. And many times I would ask, financial advisors, and they would say, I'm not investing in what I'm recommending. And I'd be like, what do you mean you're not investing what you're recommending? I'm like, how could you do that? Like, we have our Swan portfolios. Like, I make the entire office invest in those portfolios. My money's invested in those portfolios. But I found that a lot of financial advisors had their money in real estate. And I said, well, I mean, we need to have our clients invested in real estate. We need to practice what we preach, have them invest in real estate too. And I wanted to give them access to what I had a great success in, taking a net worth from 3 million to 10 million in a decade. Yeah. I mean, only really good investments in the stock market or real estate, you can do that. Right. And so I wanted to give that exposure, and I didn't want them to, be a partner directly with me and buying a duplex. It's not scalable. There's no way I could, bring 20, $30 million of clients' capital in that method. And so I thought Cygnet, baby Swan Capital, baby Swan, we'll create this fund that we can pool clients' capital every quarter and buy into apartment complexes, storage, RV parks, and short-term rentals.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I got to ask this. It's a little personal. Do you mind sharing how old you are now at this point, Andrew?
Well, I'm definitely older than I was. So I'm in 33 now. So yeah. I started again when I was 14. So maybe I'm a slow learner, but
it's amazing. It's amazing, dude. I've got a lot of years on you, and it's unreal what you've done in that period of time. In a way, as you've lived a few lifetimes in the business world, and now in the let's say thought leadership space, and with your podcast, your book. So it's amazing to me, and really cool how you're distilling everything, your experience, your knowledge, your mistakes, your personal awareness about what's important to you, and what's important not to you, like not losing more hair than you have to, and sleeping well at night, right? Like the Swan, sleeping well at night is what that stands for on your capital side. So let's just jump in the book. So when did you publish the book?
So it got published last year, and it's been a really good passion project that we've built out, and it's starting to catch a lot of steam, which is really cool because I think a lot of people are looking for meaning and they're looking for purpose, and for those hard chargers, you find more and more material wealth, and you're like, that'll make me happy. If I get this much more money, I'll be happy. If I just get another apartment complex, I'll be happy. And the problem is the football goal line keeps on moving. And that's the issue.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, again, you're the point of happiness, that line of fulfillment. You're like, if I get there, I'll be happy. Right. And I've heard that so many times. I mean, Wall Street 2 is a famous line that sticks out for me. If you've ever watched that movie, he asks him, he says, number. What's your net worth number? Yeah. And I think it's Shia LaBeouf asking Josh Brolin from, Thanos. And he's like, what's your number? And he says, more. And I'm like, that is so insidious because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Yeah. I guess where are you with? To me, that's just I see that. I'm with you on that, and it's. I mean, I guess maybe this is where you are, but maybe not. Maybe it's where I am. Like it's just that's not a winning formula, right? Like it's a. I mean, just the ambition at all costs, the growth at all costs, and just having growth and fulfillment of ambition and more accumulation, et cetera, just for the sake of that. I don't know. I have been around, I guess, enough and done enough to realize that the juice in life is not in that for me at all. And, exactly.
and maybe it is for other people, and that's great. We're all different, but where are you with all that?
I think it's wisdom. I think if you live long enough, you realize that that's not the case. You keep on getting, if I just made 100, if I just made 150, if I just made 1 million, then you'd be happy. And it's for people that have got there and they realized, and that's the reason I wrote the book, The Giving Crisis, is like, you don't have to climb up that building, climb up the ladder, then get to the top of the roof and say, wow, it was not as fulfilling as I thought it was. Before you start climbing Maslow's, hierarchy of needs, and you finally get to, nirvana, it might not be as exciting as you thought it was. And so that's why I try to encourage people to start giving to something greater than themselves. For me, with my spiritual beliefs, that means something different. If you like to save the whales, that's great. But I think you got to give to something greater than yourself. And so what we teach people in the book is how to start giving half your money away and sometimes most of your net worth away, which is what I recommend. That's why my channel, The Everyday Philanthropist, is I called it that. Like anybody can be a philanthropist. It's just someone that gives a large percentage of their net worth and their net income away.
Okay. And that is one of the things I alluded to at the top of the episode, is like, that to me is completely unique. Like philanthropy is not, I mean, obviously we, tithing and supporting charity, but to that extent, or at least in that context of giving most of your net worth away, or half your income away, like explain that a little bit. Like where's the juice in that in your eyes?
Yeah, I think what it does is it takes money's, because I'm naturally an ambitious person. Like I'm a hard charger, but the problem is my drivenness will drive over people. Eventually my drive will start to use people to get money. And that starts to affect all the relationships you have. You start to treat employees different. You start to treat your family different and your loved ones different. And if anyone's ever suffered with workaholism, like it's the only drug addiction that people will applaud you all the way into rehab and past. And that's what I found. Like people are, you're doing great. You've accumulated all this. How does it feel? And you're like, I feel empty. I mean, that Tom Brady interview is just so revealing, to have all those rings, to have the supermodel wife, to have it all. And he says, I feel empty. I mean, that was the most vulnerable that a GOAT has probably ever been. And you see this with Robin Williams and Anthony Bourdain. Like they're searching for the happiness, and they're the best in their field. They have success, they have monetary success, and they're still not happy. And so that's why I wrote The Giving Crisis, to try to save the young kid at 20, 25 that was like me, that just put all their net worth and self-worth combined. And that's at all cost, be ambitious.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And you talk about the GOAT in particular, and Robin Williams, Bourdain, like people love those guys, especially Robin Williams and Bourdain.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, but the tragedy of them and their own lack of like any sort of peace, fulfillment, like inner alignment, I guess. Sure. And how sad, right? Like, and then I started thinking, like, as you were talking about, I'm like, were those guys like, were they giving at a meaningful level? In other words, Brady, like sports guy, like, I don't know, it's not really a giving role anyway, except entertainment, but like, know, the entertainers like Robin Williams and Bourdain, and just kind of Robin Williams essentially for me was just like the definition of kind of an open-hearted dude. And I just wonder if he found what you found in terms of like the magic of giving and whatever that looked like. And maybe that was what was missing for him. And I don't know, in my own path, I've just, the next level sense of mission and purpose that I found has been completely outside of like money. I kind of stumbled on it inside of making money, if you will, but like what it is in and of itself is really not. I would do it certainly for free, and probably will do it for free in a lot of ways, which is basically just contributing to people's highest and best selves and their own journey and their own, like, if you will, self-actualization, or kind of becoming the next best version of themselves. And that's kind of my own personal space, and everybody's is different. Right.
Absolutely. I think it's good though. I mean, when you're pouring yourself out to help others, I mean, I think that's what it's all about, is because if you help enough people, you're going to realize that your situation that you're complaining about, that you have all the focus, the mirrors all on yourself, and your problems start to become paling in comparison. You know, when I brought on Charity Waters, Scott Harrison, on my podcast, and he tells me about these stories where people have to walk 3 miles for water, my concerns just go right out the window. It's like, okay, whatever I have, I need to start giving, because I can turn on the tap any at my office, at my house. I got a whole lake in front of my house that's full of fresh water, and these people are literally thirsting to death. And here I am complaining about my problems. Sorry. I'm stressed out from the problems I created in my own life. These people got real problems. And I think that's where you can start saying worry and anxiety, which we know right now is on a huge trajectory up. Like, again, we're the wealthiest we've ever been in history, wealthiest civilization in history, yet we're the most anxious, most suicidal. And you think, wow, that shouldn't be correlated, but it is. Yeah.
Great point. All right. So just kind of walk us through the book a little bit, and kind of give us the high level on the book, if you would, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I just took a fresh look at some age-old wisdom. You know, I'm not pumping out wisdom here that's never been seen. It's like, you know, when, as Jim Rohn once said, you know, show me your antique factory where you're pumping out the antiques. My job is just repackaging old truths. It's like, again, 92% of the average American spends everything on themselves. 92% of their incomes is spent on themselves. They save or invest 6%. And then the average American, if they give at all, only gives 2%. And I said, we got to flip that formula where people are giving at least 10% to a charity or church, whatever they believe in, that's greater than themselves. They need to start investing 20% long-term, ideally to real estate, ideally to a Roth IRA, to some long-term asset. And then they need to live lavishly on 70%. And if we teach everybody that, our kids, our grandkids, the people that work for us, if we teach them that and we help guide them to that, I think they're going to get it a lot more in balance than where we see the average American.
What is the title, The Giving Crisis? What's the crisis part? What does that refer to?
Yeah. So one of the best years of my life is, and a lot of people can relate if you've had a close relationship with a grandparent. I was not very close with my grandfather. He was always a lot older than me. And so when my grandmother died at 91, I was actually the only bachelor in the house. So I actually spent 1 year living with my grandfather when my grandmother died. He was 93, still driving, sharp as a tack, had retired at 50. from the U.S. Navy, never worked again for 40 plus years.
Amazing.
And we just talked about life, and he lived the Great Depression. And so when he was telling me about how that during the Great Depression, the average American percent of their income away. I said, do you understand, Pablo, that the average American is only giving 2% of their income away? Yet in the Great Depression with 25% unemployment, they were more generous back then. And I was like, that's why they called them the greatest generation. And they call us like Generation Z, like it's the end. Because we have it mixed up. We have our priorities mixed up.
Yeah. So the crisis is essentially calling out the fact that this generation is not giving, right? It's the giving crisis itself is the crisis of not giving as humanity. We're not giving to each other like we used to.
Yeah. And what's sad is we have a good talking game. Like, I mean, Gen Z and millennials, they're all about social justice. They're all about the environment. Yet they say one thing, but their money says another. And so I always tell people, because I'm ripping off Jesus right here, is like, find out where your treasure is. That's where your heart is. And so if you say something, then you should back it up with your money. So that's where and then sometimes you got to actually start with your money, and maybe your heart will follow. And that's what I want to encourage people to do, is step out, start being more generous in your community, and stop complaining about your community. And if you gave more, maybe your heart would follow, and you'd have more respect, more love for the people that are different than you.
I love that. Like, to me, it's like the whole concept of like leading with action, right? Like, okay, exactly. Maybe there's so many of us have, including myself, have suffered around just not knowing my passion, right? Not knowing where my heart is, not knowing what makes my heart sing, not knowing my sense of purpose and mission. I'm fortunate enough to have kind of found that in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years. But I, for a very, very long time, I was in the same space. And what I hear you saying is like, all right, let's start with just taking the action and putting your value into, in your case, your community, your church, your charity, your world, and seeing from that point where your heart ends up, as opposed to like following your heart, following your passion, and then giving from there. I really love that.
Yeah. And I think sadly, for the people, because I get a lot of keyboard soldiers, they're like, you got to be a cheerful giver. And I'm like, no, sometimes you got to be a giver, and then you'd be more cheerful. Like, again, it's the chicken or the egg. And I just say, go out and do. And I think it'll all work itself out. And I think when it comes back to passion, like you were saying, is like the reason I'm so passionate about what we do here at the Cygnet Fund and at Swan Capital is because I've done it for 30,000 hours. I mean, back to Malcolm Gladwell, like, I like it because I'm good at it, and I'm good at it because not because I'm, Doogie Howser. It's because I've been doing it for 30,000 hours.
I love that. And Malcolm Gladwell is a great example. There's a few other authors, thought leaders that are hammering on that right now. And I'm not pulling right out of my hat who those folks are, but essentially this whole myth of following, like identifying your bliss, and then following your bliss. And that's the way to get good and get proficient and get very successful at it, is like putting the bliss, passion, whatever you want to call it, first, and then following that. And where you are and where Gladwell is like, no, that's not it. It's like, it's go get good at something, like whatever that is, a trade, a business,
and start giving. Because the research backs this up. There's not a bunch of mumbo mindset, inspirational. I mean, we're backing this up with data that a lot of times they've proven that if you just increase someone's generosity, that their mental health improves. And so we have a mental health crisis. Another reason I called it the giving crisis is because it's a crisis of health. Now, some people need to be medicated. Some people definitely need to have counseling, all of that. Of course, don't neglect those things. But if you started giving, you're going to be passionate because you're helping people that can never pay you back. And that's so awesome when you can do that.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know, kind of the psych major in me says like, you're almost training your self-conscious by the actions you're taking out there in the real world, and the place that you're literally putting your money and your time and your resources. And you're almost training your self-conscious to follow that and which creates this, again, this kind of, from there, that's where your purpose comes from, and
Exactly.
in your mission. But again, I really love that you got to the point of in your case, the 30,000 hours that you put into Swan and Cygnet, and why you're passionate. That's why you're passionate, right? Is because of the investment you've made and getting really good at that, as opposed to like finding this magical, I call it your superpower, which some of my coaching clients, mastermind, were probably going to be looking at me a little sideways on this, because I talk about that a lot too, and being naturally aligned with what you're good at. But kind of not a flip side, but a different consideration is just doing something that, hopefully you're kind of naturally good at from the beginning, but then getting masterful at that by the investment of time and energy and resources.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, dude, there's so many things that I feel like we could go get into, and we'll probably have to have you on the show again, because I can tell that you like you said, you're a hard charger, and I'm sure that what all the other things that you do in the business world and entrepreneurial world and thought leadership world, you do really well as well. I can't imagine you being mediocre at any of it, given who you are and what you're up to. But I guess for you, like big picture, Swan, Cygnet, thought leadership, podcast, book. I want to talk to you about kind of what you see next. Before I do that, you're a very self-aware guy. You strike me as that. And you're able to kind of call yourself out sometimes on like, this isn't the direction I want to go. And I mean, even your identification of how your ambition level can run people over, and which is ultimately like self-destructive, right? Because if you're to your employees, you're ultimately hurting yourself. You're running them over, et cetera. I mean, just your awareness at this point in your life, how you can see that for yourself, which is really, I mean, remarkable. And then also act in accordance with that and structure yourself and your life with that in place. But I guess for me, I'm just kind of dying to ask, like, where's the highest level of juice in all this for you? Is it the podcast? Is it the book? Is it your spirituality? Is it, inside of the business? What is it, just overall mission and purpose? Where is that for you?
Yeah, I think what I'm enjoying the most right now is the podcast. I've had some really great, I started this show talking about meeting your heroes. I've met some of my heroes, and they've actually not disappointed too. And so I've brought on some pastors like David Platt and Craig Rochelle, who have listened to their podcasts, and you finally meet them and you're like, okay, these people are the real deal. And then you bring on people like Larry the Cable Guy, which all you can do is not stop from laughing. Exactly. And then you meet Dr. Ben Carson, who you want to stay so quiet because you're in greatness of someone that's so smart. And it's just this theme of someone using their talents, their treasure, their influence for a singular cause and wanting to be the end of something. And I think that's so important when, I've brought on people that said, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to solve. Like back to going full circle with Scott Harrison and Charity Water is like, I want to be the end of people not having drinking water. Like when you decide to use your business, to use your skills and the talents that you have for a singular purpose, that actually can create a cycle where you're more passionate about the work you're doing because it creates income and creates funds to give more. And it's just this beautiful cycle that I wish people would jump on and take it for a ride.
Yeah. I love that it's the podcast for you. And I can see why it is, because of the reach that is possible in podcasting. I'm with you, man. Like the kind of the longer form interview based podcasts for me are like the most exciting and obviously what I do because of the kind of the depth that you can get to in people's work, really getting into people's worlds and like what is important to them. And then also just the kind of the intellectual, like fun aspect of it, if you will. And, and also the collaborative aspect of it. Like you and the guest are just jamming, right? But you're doing it with purpose and kind of a common mission and meaning and producing as much value for the listener as you can. So you're bringing your highest and best, they're bringing their highest and best. and you're showing up and like aligning and and hopefully creating something magical. So for listeners, it's the Rich, Young, Powerful podcast. I'm sure it's everywhere, right? Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
You got it.
Yep. Is it weekly? How often you publish?
Yeah. So we post 2 guests a month. And we've just enjoyed every guest that we've had. Dabo Sweeney, talk about someone made $100 million contract and then wants to give most of it away to his local community and the efforts. And so I think a lot of people from different walks of life will enjoy it. We've had athletes and different people on that I think a lot of people would connect with. So check it out. And, like you said, I would love to come back anytime to talk more about the Cygnet Fund, because I love talking about, the due diligence that we do with operators. Cool. Is a lot of fun stuff we're doing there too.
Where are you going from here, Andrew? What's next? Either in terms of business and thought leadership, influence, what's next for you?
Yeah, I think what's next for me is just continuing to grow Cygnet. That's something we started, again, for a year and a half ago, and it's starting to take off. And I just want to continue to grow that well. And, of course, anytime you start something new and then you have a fluctuating market, be it the stock market or being the real estate market, you have to change, and you're learning and adapting your processes and your systems while the underlying market is changing with you. And so we've just seen that with real estate, with interest rates going up so fast. You have to address that and make sure you communicate to your clients what's transpiring. Yeah,
man. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, you kind of point out the elephant in the room in the syndication space, business space, investment space. Like, not just interest rates rising fast, but like essentially quintupling in a year, which has never happened. Nobody could have ever seen happening, I guess. I mean, and so for you to have started when you started and kind of looking at that's like the main focus of what you're doing next. You're obviously excited about it. And there's a lot at stake, right? This isn't just a, solopreneur sort of thing or, an art, like a creation of intellectual property thing. You've got millions and millions and millions of other people's money at stake. And you got to be good at what really bring your best and do your best. And then all the
I think we all do. I mean, all of your listeners probably feel that responsibility. And if you don't, I mean, sometimes you need the wake up call, like me telling you, you're dealing with other people's money. You should feel the burden and the responsibility when you're investing other people's money, because it is someone else's retirement. And so it's a heavy responsibility, but that's what we all signed up for if we're investors and we're taking investment capital.
I'm going to kind of borrow from Lewis Howes here, the thought leader, interviewer, podcaster, et cetera. I've never asked this question before, but like he asks it every time. I think he calls it the 3 truths. Like, if you were gone tomorrow, what 3 truths? I'm going to say, like, let's just keep it at 1. Like, at this point, you're still way young, and like you got some exciting stuff ahead of you, and I mean, huge potential, right? But looking at like up to this point, like, what would you want kind of the overall messaging or theme be that you leave, the legacy, I guess, that you're leaving behind?
Yeah, I mean, I want people to say, well, that person was poured into and he was poured out. I mean, I don't want to be used up, and I don't want to be used up for my own selfish reasons. I want to be used up because I gave out. And I feel like if you do that, you will get replenished. And so it's kind of scary. That's the whole point of delayed gratification, is you just keep on pouring, you keep on pouring. And if you do that, I think it'll all go full cycle. That's my belief. That's what.
So it's what I hear there is just service, man. Right? Like its own reward, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's on my grandfather's tombstone, a good and faithful servant. And so I'd be lucky, I'd be blessed if that was on my tombstone.
Well, dude, I'd say the way the immense body of work that you've already done, the way you're distilling it into very approachable points of wisdom in the podcast and the book, and it's awesome, man. Congratulations. Thank you. Really grateful to connect with you, and grateful for you coming on the show and sharing what you've shared, but also just your energy, man, your excitement, your passion, your enthusiasm, optimism. I love it. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm happy to come on anytime.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, listeners. Hopefully you got I'm really into this whole juice thing right now. I don't know. I like what it gives us access to as people. Like, where's your juice, right? And whether it's business, life, etc. I think locking into, like, at least being aware of that, kind of lining up with it is pretty magical place to be. So hopefully, listeners, you got some juice out of this, and we'll keep bringing it to you. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.
This has been The Apartment Gurus with Tate Siemer. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. To contact Tate, go to www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. He loves to hear from you and thanks you for being a valued listener. Just a reminder that you are the guru. See you on the next episode of The Apartment Gurus.